Welcome to CyberMAYnia, cyber talks with the brightest minds in cybersecurity. Discussing risks, AI, emerging threats, workforce challenges, and more. With your host, May Brooks.
Hello and welcome to the first episode of Season 2 of CyberMAYnia. And with me today is Kyle Hinterberg. I said it right before the recording. I know I'll get it wrong. I knew it. Kyle, how are you today?
I'm doing excellent.
Excellent is good. Fantastic. So, as we always do on this show, we started in the same way with you telling us a little bit about you, yourself, and your crazy world story in cybersecurity.
Sure thing. So really, I got into, I think, cybersecurity, or like IT specifically, the way I think a lot of, men about my age did. It all came from playing video games. And so back when I was younger, I feel like it was trying to figure out how to do a network LAN to play Warcraft was really my introduction. And then from there, my brother actually went to college to be in IT, and I eventually followed along. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I was like, I kind of know this stuff, so I did that. Got a job working with him in IT at a company called Doctors Foster & Smith, if anyone's ever heard of it, the pet cataloger and retailer and whatnot, doing IT stuff. And it was kind of funny because we had essentially a team of, really 4 IT people, which were me, my brother, my future fiance, and one other guy. And so it was us, and eventually, yeah, that's about it. It was us and him. And eventually our manager, though, came, and I got into cybersecurity specifically because he came to us and said, hey, we've been doing this thing called PCI, and our acquiring bank is saying, hey, we got to do a little bit something more. We got to get someone certified and trained to make sure we're doing this right. And so at the time, I was a little bit the low man on the totem pole, but I also had an interest. And so I went and became an ISA, or internal security assessor, and so started doing PCI there. And then that company was actually eventually bought by Petco. And at that time, we were kind of thinking, hey, we're kind of a family here running this IT department. It might not be the best idea, and Petco probably has, policies against such a thing. So I moved over to Foot Locker. I was there for a while as an ISA doing PCI work, and then after doing that for a few years, jumped to the other side of the table and became a consultant. And now for the last 6 or so years, I've been a QSA, essentially someone who does PCI assessments for other organizations. And now I'm a senior manager over at LBMC doing PCI work.
Fantastic. Well, I actually love PCI for one reason. It's a wonderful example of how the industry sort of regulated itself, because it wasn't created. A lot of people think that it's a law. No, it's not a law. Yeah. So it's a regulation. No, it's actually not even a regulation. It's an idea that came from the big credit card companies. I think that
it's the card brands.
It was something like 1997. They released the first version, something like that.
It was later than that. Initially, the card brands themselves all released their own versions of essentially compliance programs. And so Visa and MasterCard, they all had their own set of standards. It's kind of like the same issue I feel like we have here over in the United States all the time, where all the states try to do their own things. And then eventually, the federal law comes in and just governs it. And that's kind of what happened, that all of the card brands were trying to do their own thing. And then they all got together and say, hey, let's organize this. And so they made the PCI Security Standards Council, which is then a third party, not directly related to the card brands, but just kind of controlled by them. And they created the PCI DSS, the data security standard, and then basically said, hey, if you want to be able to use our credit cards to take payments for your customers, you need to follow this. Otherwise, we will either fine you or just remove your ability to use our cards.
Exactly. And that's phenomenal, because basically they said, you don't want to comply, you don't have to use cash. We don't care. We're not going to make you. It's your choice. So they use the carrot here, and I think it's a wonderful example of how the industry regulated itself in this regard. I want to ask you about, you've been focused on PCI for a very long time, relatively.
Yeah.
How does it evolve currently, given the current nature of cybersecurity threats?
I would say, for the past many years, a lot of people have thought that PCI was going to kind of trickle off a little bit because of everyone is moving to, digital currencies and things of that nature. My focus obviously is in the United States, so I can't speak in essentially globally. And I know across the globe, some areas it isn't as impactful in a sense from PCI as it is in other places, especially places that might be a little bit more acceptable or accepting of digital currency. But at least here in the United States, it's still pretty strong. Most all merchants still need to follow PCI. The big thing that's really been happening is a lot of organizations are working to essentially outsource or minimize the scope of their environment. The two biggest things that are going on is almost every store you go in, when they have pin pads, the terminals, almost all of those use what's known as a point-to-point or P2PE solution that just encrypts that whole transaction and removes them almost entirely from needing to do, the high majority of the controls. If you look at the DSS itself, there's over 300 requirements you need to follow if you're doing everything. If you have that P2PE, it knocks it down to, I think, around 30 or so requirements is really all you need to worry about. And then on the e-commerce side, people have, saw, hey, that was really awesome. You removed yourself from scope. We want to do that too. And so most organizations are working to, or either have, leveraged either iframes or hosted payment pages. So again, they themselves aren't ever interacting with that card data. They're handing it right off to, an acquirer or bank, a payment gateway, and letting them deal with that. So it's still really relevant, but a lot of organizations are working towards that, and it's becoming a lot more, to a degree, supply chain management a little bit to make sure that all of their service providers are doing what they need to do, so that way they can offload, a good portion of that risk.
That is actually a huge question, not just with PCI. I think talking about accountability in general, and I used to be a CISO for a digital bank, and that was something that I was always concerned about, because at the end of the day, and my R&D team hated when I said that, but being a digital bank, they built a very nice and very convenient and very pretty app, which connected to about 200 critical APIs that did the actual core banking and services and everything. But the accountability is ours. I can't say, oh, it's their fault because they did the whatever it was. And this actually came relevant in the last few weeks with, I don't know if you're following the Finastra data breach. They had
I've heard about it,
breach.
but not details.
So they serve over 8,000 customers worldwide, 45 of the 50 largest banks in the world, and they had a major data breach with 400 gigas reported stolen.
Wow.
The fact is that, and I last checked a few days ago, so the 24th or 25th of November, and it was still not published what was stolen. Who are the impacted
Whose data,
customers?
what data?
Exactly. And as a customer, I'm not going to go to whoever it is and say, oh, someone stole my data from you. I'm going to go to my bank and tell them, that's my data. Why was it stolen? Yep. And that is huge. So this whole thing, and I think that especially for smaller retailers, they have no idea that they're supposed to do third-party risk assessment. They have no idea. Someone tells them, pay me X% of each transaction, and they'll do it because they can't do PCI on their own.
Yeah.
So it raises a lot of questions around accountability and responsibility and who's going to manage who. But
yeah, no, absolutely.
Yeah. So what sort of challenges do you see today? I see a lot of organizations that are trying to actually use those third parties, but I'm talking about the big retailers that are still implementing PCI DSS. Can you share some of the challenges that they currently face?
Sure.
Especially with the current compliance sphere that is hammering them down?
Right now, a lot of organizations are in like the last push because PCI DSS version 4 has come out. It came out actually over a year ago, but there was a period of a year to allow companies to transition, and that transition period ends in the end of March. And so all the new requirements, there are 64 brand new requirements, and all of those are currently considered best practices. You can do them if you want to. You probably should be doing them, but if you're not going to be penalized or be non-compliant. As of April 1st of 25, all of those are going to be requirements, and the expectation is you're going to be following them. And a good number of them aren't too big of a deal. A lot of them are like policy, and procedure in nature, and so updating stuff. The big thing there is making sure you have roles and responsibilities. I know myself as a QSA, all the time I get on the call and it's like, hey, who manages this? And it's like, oh, that's this person. Oh, they quit. Oh no, we transferred it to this team. And so, documenting that is one of the big goals. But right now, for most of the clients I deal with, and also most of the organizations I've talked to, the big ones are the requirement numbers are 643 and 1161. If you Google right now PCI 643 1161, you're going to see a whole bunch of companies that are out there just targeting those specifically because a lot of organizations are struggling, and they are really around the idea of using an iframe. Because historically, if you used an iframe, you were able to, and if people aren't familiar, the idea of an iframe, you have your website, you pull in an iframe from, bank.com, and when someone enters their payment information, it goes directly into bank.com's website. It doesn't go into your website, and so that reduces your risk. And because of that, a lot of the controls are greatly reduced. Now there's a new requirement that if you have any e-commerce, including an iframe, you have to have the ability to manage all of the scripts you have on your page that's holding that iframe. And then for all of those scripts, ensure their integrity, which can be very difficult if you're pulling in scripts from Google or some of these other places that change things, and you have, you can't really use like a script resource integrity check, which is what the DSS is going to tell you to do. But to do all of that, and then the 1161, the second requirement comes into it, where you essentially have to have requirements, or a requirement to be able to do an integrity monitoring of the site. And the thought there is essentially doing kind of like a man in the middle type of attack on yourself to see if the site you're serving up to your customer is what you expect it to be. So not just confirming that your code is, all good and whatnot when it's sitting in your data center, but when it's actually being sent out on the web, and it's pulling in different pieces of JavaScript or third-party code from wherever, when all of that gets built together and then sent to your customer's browser, that they're getting what you expect. And so those two requirements are the ones giving most people heartache. And essentially, most organizations are just right now having to lean towards just buying a solution that will do that for them, because it's difficult to do it internally.
Yeah, it makes sense. It makes a lot of sense. I remember actually the first time I encountered using iframe in an e-commerce website, and it was actually very weird. I saw this website, and they didn't even have, and we're talking probably 10 years ago, 8 years ago. It was a long time ago. They didn't even have an SSL certificate. They had nothing. It looked like the fishiest website in the world. Now, I looked at the code to see what's going on, because my mom actually sent me this, and she wanted to buy something from this website. I don't even remember what it was. Oh, now I remember. It was for an online event. It was for a live event, for a live show in a club close to our house. Okay. So I looked at this. I could see the iframe, and I actually called the website manager, the club manager, because we grew up in the same area, so I knew who it was, and looked at your site. Looks like the fishiest site in the world. I saw the code. It's fine. But someone who's not going to look at the source will never, ever trust this website. Yeah, that's actually, we see that most people just call us and give us their credit card on the phone, which makes perfect sense. Just saying. But they actually saw that. And I found it very, very weird, because I remember when PCI started, there was a lot of talk, at least in Israel and the UK, that I saw a lot of talk. People were looking for this little mark that it is PCI compliant.
Yeah,
and it was
check
sort
mark
of like
somewhere.
exactly, like a badge of honor. Yeah, this site is okay. It has the check mark, which is a nice icon, but never mind. That's fine. And this case actually made me think, wait a minute. PCI could have been such a wonderful driver, was such a wonderful driver for security awareness. With all this iframe, people who are not as tech savvy, they won't know. They have no idea how to even evaluate if this website is legitimate or not. So I think this is a missed opportunity. That's how I see it a little bit.
No, I that makes sense to me, because it's one of those things too. Whenever I have family members, send in links or whatever, it's always like, I don't know, like more often than not, I tell people that, direct them to Amazon or someone like that, which is, it is what it is. I don't always like going to them, being the big one. It's nicer to deal with smaller websites, smaller companies. I generally prefer that, but at the same time, it's a lot harder to evaluate if that's secure or if you're, getting scammed. Whereas at least if you're buying through a retailer, or website like Amazon, even for Amazon resellers, you have a little bit more support there in case things go south.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you said that in the last, how many years have you been a consultant on the other side?
6 or 7 years.
Wow. Yeah, so that's a long time. So you must have built a lot of relationships with your customers, and you see a lot of different customers from different industries. How do you tackle that? How do you build those relationships and help each one of your customers grow without obviously oversharing what other customers are doing?
Absolutely. To me, the most important thing there is, there's in the world of PCI, there's kind of, two, main types of QSA companies in a sense. There's the ones that are more so, get you your report on compliance, get you your ROC, get you compliant, and then move on to the next one. And then there's more of the, consulting, a little bit more, helping organizations along, partnering with them throughout the course of their, their compliance journey in a sense. And that's more where I fall is, I've never been in one of those organizations. Again, they have their place, where you're an organization, you're doing everything right. You just need to meet your compliance. You need to check those boxes. You have your QSA help you come in, do that and get it, get your ROC out the door so you can be compliant. On my side, what I prefer to do is work with clients and ultimately, obviously want to get them a compliant ROC. That's always going to be the end goal, but more so, working with them, understanding their environment. It's very often that I'm working with clients and they think that parts of the organization think that I'm part of the company. It's like, oh, you're a third party. It's like, yeah, I'm actually a third party, but I'm here helping you through this. And that's the way I feel like it should be. And that's one of the reasons too I love PCI is it's not an audit, it's an assessment. We're not in there, as QSAs, we're not looking for gotchas. We're not trying to say, hey, look, I found this thing from 6 months ago. I'm now going to blow up your entire assessment. It's more so helping you through the assessment, making sure everything's on the up and up, but, trying to help you through it.
Fantastic. Well, I think being a consultant in many cases is you are a part of the company. You are and you're not. I mean, you're here for them, but I personally, I'm not an auditor, and I just finished an ISO audit that I was the consultant helping the company go through the audits. And I know that auditors are sometimes perceived as the gotcha people, but that's the whole point of doing an assessment or doing an audit. If everything was fine and we find absolutely nothing, well, I've never seen anyone in any field, cybersecurity or not cybersecurity, that is perfect. And even if you're doing things perfectly, there's always the next level. You can always take it higher. I want to move on from, still PCI, but I want to move on to other things that you do. You give back a lot to community. You talk about PCI. You have your own podcast, the Cybersecurity Sense podcast, that talks about PCI and security in general. And I want to ask you, what inspired you to share those insights? Because I know, and you know, and hopefully some of the people listening to us know that, for example, producing a podcast is a lot of work. It's a lot of work.
Yeah, it totally is. And even, it's one of those things like, going to give talks too. It's something that, like when you're getting ready for it and like you put the submission in, it's like, yeah, that's going to be fun. And then, it's like 2 weeks away and you still don't have your slides together. And then all of a sudden it's like, why'd I do this? But at the same time, I love doing it. For me, it's one of the biggest things is not only to give back to the community, but to make sure I'm part of the community in a sense. I live way up in northern Wisconsin, and just to give an idea for people of how far north I am, I'm further north than Toronto, so I'm pretty far up there. And I live in a town of 7,000 people, and to get to a town with more people, I have to drive over an hour. So I'm literally in the middle of nowhere. And so I feel like that's one of the ways for me to help stay plugged into the community, go to conferences, have podcasts, try to build connections, because otherwise, it can, in a sense, especially post COVID, it can be a lonely world. And so I feel like that's one of the best ways to stay connected and at the same time help other people, get to where I am or, even past me. That's another, really important thing to me is trying to, help build up the career force we have out there and, give back to those individuals.
That's beautiful. And I know that you also mentor a lot of youngsters and junior consultants coming into the industry. What sort of skills and qualities do you find that are really essentials for those coming into the security field in general and maybe specifically for PCI?
I would say in general, the two things that kind of tie together in my mind, but are, the ability to do troubleshooting just in general, and then curiosity. I feel like if you could mix those two things together, and it wouldn't even be just, I guess, cybersecurity or PCI, it'd be anyone. Those are, I feel like, the two things you need to be able to do whatever you want. If you can, troubleshoot a problem and have the curiosity and kind of the, a little bit of like that hacker mind ideal where you can think about, hey, if I do it this way or if I do it that way, you can tackle anything and get through whatever happens. And so to me, it's not as important looking at technical skills and stuff like that. It's really understanding that side of someone's mindset if they're able to instead of trying to push through a wall, figure out the way around it.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I think that for me, it's always about passion. If someone comes into this industry and they're passionate about this industry, I know they'll do well because the rest you can teach. Technical skills we can teach, soft skills we can teach, but passion is not something that you can teach. Maybe you can share your enthusiasm and maybe get people inspired, but you can't make them love it. No. We can't make them.
No, I totally agree with that. And you can totally tell the difference between someone who's in any career, any field that they, have a passion for versus one that they don't.
Oh, completely. And I think, when people approach me and tell me, I want to be in cybersecurity, I always start with a very simple question. Why? Why do you want to be in this very tiring sometimes profession? I mean, it's not an easy profession. If within the first, let's say, 50 words, they put in the word money, I tell them, dude, there are easier ways to make money.
Yeah.
Cybersecurity is fun. It's interesting. It's a lot of things. And you can make a lot of money if you're good. If you're just doing it for the money, you're going to be mediocre. You're going to make okay pay. I mean, you're not going to starve. You're going to be fine. But wouldn't you want to do something that you're going to be good at for the next 40 years? I don't know.
Yeah.
But maybe
I feel like the two, like bad sides of recruiting for cybersecurity are, the folks that think that it's just money, and then the folks that watch TV and think that they're going to be hacking some, green screen things and, like on NCIS or whatever and doing all that. And it's like, even the people that do that don't do that way. And 90% of the jobs aren't in that field, specifically anyways.
Yeah. And even the people who do that, mostly write reports.
Yeah. That's just it. If you actually watch you watch a pen tester 8 hour day, they got maybe 20 minutes where they're doing something like that at most. Most of it is more so boring stuff.
Exactly, but for them it's not boring, and I think that's the thing. If you're passionate about it, you're gonna love it. You're gonna find your niche. Cybersecurity is so diverse. There are so many different niches that you can really find whatever suits you.
Yeah. I feel like sometimes we do ourselves a disservice when, it is just cybersecurity, and it's almost more like, I've heard it described as, going into the medical field where you can be a doctor or, someone who works in radiology or this or that. And that's a lot better way to think about cybersecurity.
Oh, completely. Completely. I always say that if we take the medical example, if we look at an orthopedic surgeon, a physiotherapist, and a radiologist, they all deal with bones and ligaments and whatever, but from very different angles.
Yep.
And cybersecurity is the same. Again, there's various professions, and there's no one path into cybersecurity. At least we need diverse thinkers.
It's almost impossible. Every time you talk to anyone, it's always going to be a different way that they, stumbled their way into it.
Yeah, well, I think that now the industry is maturing and we are getting to the next level, that there are sort of clear pathways. If I know I want to do cybersecurity and I know I want to do tech cybersecurity, I know what I have to do. I want to do GRC, I sort of know what I have to do. But it doesn't mean that you're not going to pivot throughout your career. And I think that is very important. we can't talk about cybersecurity or technology or the weather without talking about AI. I mean, maybe not the weather. Maybe we can talk about the weather without AI, but I'm not sure.
I'm not sure. I think even you need AI now
right?
to predict the weather patterns. That's all AI.
Exactly. So, I want to start with talking about AI in the context of PCI. Because we see so many interpretations in various fields in cybersecurity. How do you see AI, and even more so AI-driven attacks, how do you see it influence the credit card industry in general?
For AI-driven attacks, I guess I'm not entirely sure how it's going to be too different than what's going on right now, other than I feel like, obviously with AI, you'll be able to ramp things up, do it faster, do it more.
Exactly.
Instead of having one person do it, you can have, your bot army, of AI that's doing things more intelligently. So I think that's going to be the biggest thing. And, the easiest way to stop that on the security side is just going to be, common, best practice security things that we've all been telling people to do for the last, 20, 30 years. I feel like if you list out the top 10 things to do in security haven't changed in, again, 20 years, and they're going to be the same things that stopped, quote unquote, old school attacks versus AI attacks. I don't think that that's going to change. It's just that people are going to have to realize it's going to be coming faster and harder.
But how are we going to do that? I mean, I want to reference your talk where we met. We met in the ISC2 Congress in Vegas, and you gave a fantastic talk about deepfake and AI and new version of attacks that are being utilized. And as a researcher who researches the human side, some of these attacks, I look at them and it takes me a lot of time to make sure 100% is it real or is it fake? And I'm a professional. How do we expect people to do it?
That's one place where I have, kind of decided on my opinion is we can no longer worry about if it's real or fake. And I feel like even, like you'll hear people or see stuff like, look to see, how many fingers does someone have or how many, fingers are in a picture. But I feel like my thought on that is it's becoming the same thing as telling someone to look for the little lock in the URL bar. We used to tell people, hey, look for the lock. They'll tell you it's secure. But ever since the past 5 years, everything is secure. Everything has a lock. It doesn't mean any different. It doesn't actually help people. And like we were just talking about, sketchy websites. All those sketchy websites are secure as far as that goes. They're encrypting your data when it sends over the internet. It's just whatever they do when they get it. And I feel like we're doing a little bit of the same thing when we're telling people to look for how many fingers does someone have, instead of looking for those, because the problem is then if someone has all the right number of fingers or a picture looks correct, they're going to assume it's good. But it probably isn't, and so instead of trying to figure out what's real or fake, more so just deal with everything like it is a potential attack and try to determine what the outcome is. If someone's trying to push you outside of your comfort zone, trying to, make you respond to something quickly, trying to get you to give away sensitive information, whatever it is. And, again, don't even worry if it's real or fake. Just understand more so that emotional side of it.
I tend to agree. I think it's kind of sad if humanity has to assume that everything we see anywhere is fake, but it is. Honestly, it is. And I don't know if you must have seen it going on online, because it's been going on Facebook and Instagram, whatever, for 3 years now. There's a beautiful photo of an elephant carrying a little lion cub in its trunk and taking it towards the water reservoir in the summer because the cub was too exhausted to have to get to the water. And it is, people are sending it with the caption, this was announced as the most heart-moving photo of whatever. Only tiny little problem, it's completely fake. Now, when I first saw this photo, I was like, oh wow, what a beautiful story. And then I looked at the photo and like, I mean, it's really good, but it's not that good. And then I Googled it and I found out it was actually first released as an April Fool's Day joke. But that was 3 years ago and it's still going on, and people just take this as fact. Now, this is just something that was, honestly, I don't think there was something malicious about it. It's just a nice story, but people take this as fact, and we saw that around the election, not just in the US, in the UK as well, in Israel, in everywhere, all over the world. We see, honestly, we can't trust what we see anymore. It's
No,
not just cybersecurity.
even like with that, there is just over here in the United States where there was in the past several months several hurricanes, and there was an image shared. A lot of people did of a little girl crying, and everyone was sharing this around, and it was AI generated. And then even once it was, people were told, they still said, well, this still looks and feels like I want to, feel,
Share.
and this is, still sharing the emotion I want to share. And so they determined it to be authentic from that standpoint. Even though it's not an authentic image, it created authentic feeling, which is a weird place to be, but that's where we're at.
Well, absolutely. Yesterday I was contacted by a friend of mine. She's an investigative journalist, and she sent me an app, a dating app, and she told me, look at this thing. Is this legitimate? I mean, this is a dating app. It's not dating, it's an online flirting, chatting app that it actually says on the bottom, they don't hide it. It's not in the somewhere deep in the no, it's on the website, on the main page, that the conversations are not with real people. It's with AI generated chats that are whatever. And they're obviously it's for money and whatever. She asked me, is this a scam? Well, no, they actually say this is, you're talking to AI. I mean, there's no
Depending
scam
on who you
here.
ask, it might not be what you want, but I guess they think there's a market for it.
Yeah, and if, again, it's on the main side. They didn't hide it in the tiers. It's on the main page. If you want to talk to a bot, but don't say this is fraud. This is not fraud. This is like they said you're talking to a bot. You have to decide if you want to do that. I sometimes have my chats with Alexa. I scream at her when she doesn't listen to me. I tell her to respect my authority. She doesn't. But it's a problem. It's a problem. Yeah. So I think that this is something that, as an industry, and you talked about it in your presentation, it's very hard today to differentiate between real and fake.
Yeah.
And
it's almost impossible. And the worst part is people as a whole, from right now, what has been studied and seen, most people tend to, if you're presented with fake images, you tend more likely than not to believe them to be real. Most of us, that's just our automatic, and to some degree we got to start switching that. It's the old trust but verify. We have to have now verify then trust, because you just can't trust anything. And part of the issue, I feel like, too, with the whole idea of, can you see if something's real or fake, is, now people can use filters and whatnot that they're going to modify themselves, and to them, that might be their real persona, the way they want to present themselves. But if you're watching it or looking at it, it's going to obviously be, in a sense, a deep fake or a little bit, digitally altered, but yet it is still an authentic communication. And so that's where it's going to be hard to determine, is this real or not?
So how do you see technology utilizing, us as an industry, utilizing exactly the same tools, either to protect or to enhance or to use it to our advantage instead of for bad?
There are some cool things specifically with deepfake technology and creating, AI avatars of individuals, or even voice, like one of the things that, like, specifically for PCI, obviously security awareness training is really important. It's really cool now. If you would want to, you can use AI to essentially translate your security awareness into any language. And you can even, if you have a video of yourself, you can have the AI where it modifies your lips so it looks like you're speaking in the other language, which, could be used for nefarious purposes and be, not good, but at the same time could be used for good purposes. So that way you can, talk to your whole company and make it look like you're, actually speaking the language with them, which is a lot more impactful for connection. So it's all, I feel like, a little bit, two sides of the same coin, where, anything that can be used bad can be used good. Right now, I think that for the most part, deepfakes lean on the bad side, and we have to start figuring out more positive use cases for them. But there are some out there like that, though, again, for the most part, it's going to be on the bad side, and just telling, I feel like it's the same thing right now with emails forever. Basically we've just been telling everyone, don't click any email. Anything you ever seen in email, don't click it. And now we just have to, start saying any video you see, don't believe it. Don't believe anything in any video. Don't do what Elon Musk tells you. He's not really going to give you 50 Bitcoin.
Yeah, well, but again, for us as professionals, it's easy, but even that, it's not that easy. When you get a phone call from your son, from your friend, from your parent, and they tell you they're in trouble and they need your help, and it's their voice, it's not that easy to do anything. And you actually gave a great example of how you can detect that.
Yeah, I was going to say for that specifically, we're at a point where every family should essentially have, a code word that you share with everyone, or something similar to that. So that way, if you're talking to them, you can say, say this word or whatever it is. If they say flamingo, that that's actually them, and you can confirm. Or obviously potentially other secrets that you might be able to share that only they would know. But something like that is really almost a requirement at this point. And even outside of your actual family, it might be, on your work family, things to consider as well, because you might be put into a situation where you get a call from someone, and is it really them or not? You can no longer confirm that.
Exactly. I'm not a big fan of the panic word. First, because if you're actually in a state of panic, you might not remember the word.
Yeah.
But you can have that as well, and we have that in the family as well. But what I usually do, and I already shared it here in the podcast, is I ask a personal question. And you gave the example of the Ferrari executive that asked about the book.
Yep.
And
I gave the book I borrowed to you.
Exactly. And I asked my son, when I thought that it may not be my son talking to me, I asked him, who was your first martial arts instructor? Now, I always use this example because this is an actual question I asked him. And because I decided to talk about it on the podcast, I'll always use this as an example on the podcast. I will never, ever ask this question again. Never. I might ask him, what did we have for dinner last night?
Yeah.
Or what's the name of the book that Grandma just bought you? Whatever.
Yeah. Something like that's perfect.
Exactly.
And to your point, a lot of times that can be easier than a code word, but essentially the same type of an idea, something that only that individual and you would know, and that, the scammer isn't going to be able to fake, because the truth is it's so easy now that you can go on, using like 11 Labs is probably the most well known, but there's many other tools out there where you can go out there and with, literally 30 seconds of someone's voice, you can have a pretty good voice likeness of them and be able to, pretend to be whoever you want to be, especially for a voice call.
Yeah, well, I think that today, one of the things that we used to say on phishing emails is look for grammar mistakes, for misspells. For me now, if I see an email with misspelled, I'm saying, okay, this is real. This was not AI generated. Yeah. ChatGPT knows how to spell whatever.
Yep. Yeah. Yep. So if you see mistakes, that's
probably a human.
I've actually kind of myself started to wonder: are phishers going to start purposely adding in a few mistakes here and there so that way it looks more authentic? Because otherwise, if they're just using ChatGPT, it's going to be perfect.
It's going to be perfect, and it's going to be so. We're going to demystify you from your credit card because we want to help you. So we see. I think that we will see a lot of technological advancements here, but the thing with most scams, and that's, I think, the biggest challenge for us as professionals, people think that technology is the problem with cybersecurity. Technology is not the problem.
No.
And this is why technology can never be the solution. It can help, but technology, I see the internet as the medium in which current frauds are being portrayed, but fraudsters existed forever. It just made it
might
so much easier
amplify
for
things,
them.
But it doesn't create them.
Exactly. It's just easier for them to create it. So we need to do a better job in talking to people around us and helping them. Wow, this has I can't believe it's almost been 40 minutes. It's incredible. So I want to ask you a few last things before we wrap this up with the pop quiz. Based on your experience, what proactive approaches would you recommend organizations to adopt to help bolster themselves against all sorts of emerging threats? We said AI, we said deepfake, but those are obviously not the only ones.
To me, the number one thing that I see most organizations needing to do better at, that's going to help them better understand and protect themselves, is it really gets back to me, the important AI of asset inventory. That's the AI most of us should actually be worrying about and talking about, is understanding their inventory, what's all out there, what is actually externally facing, that they have. Understand that, it's kind of getting back to the whole idea of PCI and that side too, where before you worry about controls or implementing requirements or whatever, figure out your scope. And that's the same thing that organizations need to do. Figure out your scope, see what's there. And then once you have that figured out, then start taking those next steps. I feel like a lot of organizations go down this bad path of, hey, there's this brand new tool. We're going to spend, $50,000. We're going to put this tool in. We're going to be good. And then they find out that they have an open Amazon bucket or whatever it might be that they just weren't aware of. And so if they just take the time to understand where everything is and then start putting those controls into place, or, paying to fix whatever it might be.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. Couldn't agree more. Start with what you know before you buy something
it's always
new.
The easy stuff, and that's where we all fall down. We don't. It's the stuff that it's boring. It's not
Exactly.
cool or fun to go through and identify all your public IP addresses. No one wants to do that, but it's the most important thing to do.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Before we buy the new shiny thing.
Mm-hmm.
Before we get to the pop quiz, quick question. How can our listeners connect with you, learn from you, get your insights? What are the best places?
The best place would probably be just hit me up on LinkedIn. I'm the only Kyle Hinterberg, I think, that's on LinkedIn. So, there's not a lot of Hinterbergs out there. So, if you look for me out there, I'm sure you'll find me. I am more than happy to connect with everyone. There's also the Cybersecurity Sense podcast. You can go check me out right now. Me and a couple other guys, William and Andy, we recently did a full kind of a review of all the 12 PCI requirements and the changes moving to 4.0. So you can go out there and listen to all of those. I think that's, hopefully going to help some more organizations as they're moving to 4.0. And we've been in a little bit of a hiatus, but it should be getting back up and going pretty soon here.
Fantastic. Fantastic. Thank you, Kyle. Okay, so before we wrap this up, as always, we have the pop quiz. Very short questions, very short answers, no right or wrong answers. Ready?
Absolutely.
So let's start with something simple. What's one myth about PCI DSS that you think should be debunked by now?
That it's the minimum bar of security or the minimum bar of compliance. All these people always talk about how it's the minimum bar and like it's an easy thing to do, or that it's not all that great. And I feel like all of those are individuals who haven't actually done it. If you actually put in PCI, you follow all the controls, you have a pretty rock solid security program, in my opinion.
And it's not easy. I'm sorry.
No.
I've been involved with PCI. It's not,
It is not
easy.
easy.
No, it's not just... No. Who says it's easy? No one says it's easy. People say it's easy.
Yeah. It's the minimum bar. I hate that
it's
statement.
A minimum bar. Yeah, maybe. But it doesn't make it easy.
No.
There's also a minimum bar to qualifying for the Olympics. It still doesn't make it easy, but it's still minimum. If you weren't in cybersecurity, what would you be doing today?
Probably making something. I don't know what, but something. That's like,
With
if you
all
can
the
see
tools
behind me,
behind
my whole 3D printer workshop back there. I don't know if you can see on the camera. I got my 3D printers are usually always firing away, doing something back there, and so
cool.
That would be probably what I would be doing, making something. What it would be, I don't know.
Cool. Is there a book or a podcast or movie that has recently inspired you?
Yeah, probably a lot of all three. For podcasts, I listen to a ton of them. I can't think of any to call out. I guess one of my recent ones,
of course.
The CyberMAYnia. I thought that was too obvious.
Of course.
For something else,
yeah.
I would feel like getting back to the idea of mentoring and individuals coming into the field, or anyone at all. If anyone has never listened to it, there's the two kind of sister podcasts, Manager Tools and Career Tools. I feel like they are absolutely two podcasts that every professional anywhere should listen to. They should be absolutely required for anyone. And so if people haven't listened to them, they should start to and listen to the entire backlog.
Yeah, fantastic. That will keep them busy for a while.
Yeah.
Yeah, fantastic. Staying with people coming into cybersecurity, what's the best piece of advice for someone pursuing a career in cyber? Right? And even more specifically in security compliance?
I would say probably this is maybe a little bit general, but the biggest piece of advice is that you don't have to know the answer. You just have to know where to find the answer. And I feel like that, specifically for being a consultant, where a lot of people, a lot of junior consultants, they can get nervous because they feel like if they're on a call with someone, they have to be able to just rattle off all the answers. And no one can. All of us know how to use Google and other tools and our resources and our connections. And so that's the more important thing, is not knowing the answer, but knowing how to find the answer.
I love that. I think there's a lot of power in actually saying, you know what, I have no idea, but let me get back to you.
Let me look.
Yeah, and I love that. I remember I had a professor once who's done exactly that during a course, and I really appreciated him for it because he could have BS'd his way around it, and we wouldn't have known. We were all junior students. We had no idea, but he didn't. He said, you know what, I have no idea. I'm going to look it up and tell you next week. And he did. Yep. So I think it's phenomenal. And last but not least, one of my favorite questions that most security people don't do enough. How do you celebrate your achievements?
I don't know. That's a hard one. I probably don't as well as I should. Yeah. If you have a good answer for that one, I'll take it right now.
Well, I wish I knew. Usually with a nice bottle of wine or scotch or something. Or I can say that when I do want to share, then my husband is much better at it than I am. And when I got elected for the IC board of directors last year, he asked me, what do I want? Like, he said, you have to celebrate this. And I don't know. I really don't know. And then he had an idea to give me something remarkable. The remarkable.
That's awesome.
I absolutely love
that's
it.
Awesome.
Yeah,
that's
so that's
perfect.
One of the remarkable
that's a good idea.
Ways to celebrate your achievements. And honestly, friends, family, nice glass of wine or something, that always works for me.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Kyle,
usually
thank you.
I would say, not to cut you off, I was going to say the biggest thing whenever I accomplish something, I feel like the biggest reward is just the relaxation you get after you're done with it, and you can not have to worry about it so much.
You said a word that I've never heard of. I'm sorry. It's not in my dictionary.
You get it for at least 30 minutes. After you've completed whatever you're doing, you can sit back and have 30 minutes of okay, I'm done with that before you move on to the next problem. That's I think the biggest thing.
No, for me, not when you're ADHD. You're like, I finished that. Ooh, squirrel. Yeah, it doesn't work that way for ADHD. but maybe I should get 30 seconds. That would be nice.
Yeah, just a little bit. Give your brain a little break.
Yeah, we can try. Kyle, thank you so much for joining me today. It was amazing. What a great start to season 2 of CyberMAYnia. And for all of you watching and listening to us, don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you next time.